Hello everybody and welcome to Introduction to Logic. My name is Sean Hunter and I will be your instructor for this course. In this video I will be introducing the course. I will be going over the way that it is structured on Canvas, and at the very end I will be covering the material in the very first chapter of the textbook. For the vast majority of these videos, you will not see my face. You will see a capture of my iPad screen while I'm doing logic, but I wanted to make sure that you know what I look like so that you can yell at me if you think that I did a bad job, or praise me in person if you think I did a good job. So again, I'm going to go over the syllabus shortly. I'm going to make clear exactly what the requirements are for the course. And following that, I'll introduce the subject of logic. So, bye-bye to my face. We'll switch over to my screen. 3, 2, 1, sync. Okay, so the first thing we're going to look at is the syllabus of the course. Again, I am your instructor. My name is Sean Hunter. Canvas really shows my name is Greg. Don't call me that. I won't get mad at you, but I would prefer that you call me by the name that I actually go by. We have 3 teaching assistants in the course. We have Aaron Franklin, Thomas Rule, and James McCord. You have their email addresses there. If you have any questions about the material in the course, one of the first things that you can do is take a picture of your attempt to solve a problem and email it to either myself or the teaching assistants. I'll be checking my email very regularly throughout the course, far more regularly than I would in a non-online course. So email is a perfectly legitimate means to get help. As you can see, we will also be holding office hours on the video conferencing service Zoom. I have not had time to set that up yet, but sometime during this week we will schedule those, and I will probably hold 2 hours a week. I'm going to ask the TAs to hold half hour to 45 minutes, and that'll be one of the ways in which we can actually interact, right? So I'll get to the course goals once I've actually started talking about the first chapter. So the required text for the course, the only required text for the course actually, is an ebook that I wrote, How to Logic. It will be posted on Canvas. It is free. Now, the book that I wrote is based on the methods and techniques of another book, Willard Van Orman Quine's Methods of Logic, 4th edition. So if you're the kind of person who's uncomfortable with having an official published textbook, you're more than welcome to pick that up. I encourage you to do so. You can find used copies for very, very cheap, typically $5 to $10. But everything that you need to know will be explained in the How to Logic textbook. And I'm just going to tell you right now that what I wrote is far more accessible and understandable than this textbook. I would like to apologize if you bought a different book for the course. I was appointed to teach this class less than a week ago, and I didn't have time to change things at the bookstore. If you bought a copy of the Logic book, please try to sell it. If you can't sell it, burn it, I guess. It's really bad. The explanations are very bad. There are tons of errors. I'm not sure why we use it sometimes on this campus, so just don't buy that book. The only textbook's free. You don't have to buy anything, right? Okay, next, course communication. This is actually really important because this is an online course. It is essential that you check Canvas and your email regularly for course updates, right? There are no lectures for me to yell things at you to remind you of them, right? So you're responsible for checking your email, for checking Canvas. It will not be an acceptable excuse if you fail to hand in or complete an assignment on time that you didn't know. All of the dates are clearly posted, so again, please keep up with that. If you check the Canvas homepage for the course, I will update that with links to the modules, and it has the due dates for everything right there, right? So it shouldn't be difficult for you. Second, and this is extremely important, if you have an auditory or visual impairment especially, it is essential that you contact me immediately. Because of the way that the course is structured, because you'll have to manipulate symbols, right? it's very difficult to caption some of these things, and it's very, very difficult to present the material in a way that isn't visually grounded, and I'm more than willing to work with the Disability Resource Center to do this. I've talked a little bit about how we might accommodate these things, but it will be a lot of work for the DRC especially, and I think they would appreciate it if you got a hold of me as soon as humanly possible. Academic misconduct, don't cheat, please. I would really appreciate it if you didn't. More to the point, because this is an online course, you'll have a final exam. I will get to the structure of the assignments shortly, but the online exam will be proctored through this webcam proctoring service, ProctorU. You must have a PC or laptop to use the service. I do not believe that you can use it on a phone. That being said, I find the idea of having somebody watch me over a webcam while I'm taking a test to be creepy. So if you are in Santa Cruz, I will give you the option of taking the final exam in person, but you're not required to do so. I can't require you to do anything in person, as this is an online course. If people are interested if people who are in Santa Cruz would like some additional help, I can also meet up for office hours in person. I will be in town for the entirety of the course. Okay, evaluation and grading. So you can see on this page how your grade is going to be broken down for the course. So Canvas quizzes. For every module, you will have to complete one Canvas quiz. These will be 20% of your grade. I am not designing these to be difficult, right? They're open book, open note, they're not time limited. The important thing is to force you to regurgitate information that you will not be able to succeed in the course if you have not mastered, right? So these aren't hard, but it's important that you put the thought into completing them and getting the exercises done correctly, okay? Second, textbook exercises. In the book that I wrote, I've included exercises for each chapter. Generally how these work is they start out pretty easy and they get kind of hard. So on your exams, I'm not going to give you questions that are as hard as the hardest questions from the textbook exercises. I just want to make that abundantly clear, okay? But it's important that you try all of these. If you don't try the exercises, you will assuredly fail the final. The way that this class works is it's progressive. Everything we learn builds on everything else. And every individual technique that we're going to learn is very simple, almost mindless to apply. But if you fall behind, if you don't practice and try this regularly, you'll have a very bad time. Typically when I teach this class, though, everybody who keeps up with the work and at least tries the examples and exercises does fine. I wouldn't panic. So the third thing that you will have to do in the class, the third assignment, is you'll have to complete 3 learning practices, right? And each of them is worth 10% of your grade. Now, how this is going to work is for some weeks, you will have a week to complete the learning practice. It'll unlock Monday morning, 1 minute after midnight, and you have to hand it in the next Sunday right before midnight, right? So the point of these is not to punish you. The point of these is to get you to practice the techniques that we are learning in this course. And again, I just want to stress that much like a math course, practice is essential. None of this will be very hard as long as you try. As long as you try every chapter's exercises to the best of your ability, you can learn this, I promise. And so the learning practices are an attempt to get you to try this stuff out in a setting where it's a little more high stakes than just the pass-fail textbook exercises, right? So one thing about how these work, these learning practices, I want to encourage you to, if you have fallen a little bit behind, to catch up. So as you can see here, higher grades on subsequent learning practices replace lower grades on previous ones. And the idea is that if you fall behind, if you bomb one of them, if you have some sort of family emergency, you don't get a chance to do a good job on it, that if you come back and put in the work for the next one, it'll replace your previous scores. So here's this little example I worked out. So suppose that we have a student, Juan, he gets a 70% on the first learning practice, 80% on the second, and 95% on the third. So how this works is the 95% on the third learning practice replaces the two bad scores, so his average would be a 95% for that section of the course. And the reason I'm doing this is because everything in this class, again, builds on everything that we've learned previously. And so if you manage to do well on the later learning practices, I will take that as a sign that you've actually learned the material. I didn't put this in the final exam, but if you get a grade on the final exam that's higher than your grade average for everything else in the course, I'll just give you as your course grade the higher grade on the final exam. I need to put that in here. Okay. And yeah, you can consult all notes, lectures, the textbooks for these learning practices, but you cannot collaborate with each other. And this is because you will bomb the final exam if you don't practice this stuff consistently. I'm just telling you. That there's no way around that. And I hope this won't happen, but if I suspect that people are cheating on the learning practices, if people are just copying down answers from one another, I will switch over to proctored midterm exams, which you do not want. The focus of those will be to evaluate you in a rigorous setting. But yeah, okay. Then finally, there will be a proctored cumulative final exam. And again, you can register to take it online through this ProctorU service. You must have a webcam, some means of scanning documents to do that. I believe you also have to have a private room and a mirror. I'm not entirely sure what the mirror is for. If you will be in Santa Cruz, you again have the option of taking the final exam in person, right? So curving policy, I reserve the right to curve any assignments individually or course grades in their entirety, but I'll only curve up. And I may decide to curve up even if the average is a little bit higher than a B, but if it's lower than a B, I will definitely curve to that. Again, I don't view this course as something that should punish you. I don't think that if you put in the work, it's actually that difficult. So if grades are consistently very low, I take that as a reflection of some failure on my part, not on your part. Okay. And the schedule of assignments. I'm not going to go through all of these right this second, but I do want to explain the module structure and sort of how the work breaks down week to week. So as you can see for the first week, this week, week 1, June 24th through June 30th. Right? So typically you'll have 2 modules to complete in a week, right? Each module corresponds to 1 chapter of the textbook, right? So you'll read the textbook chapter, then you will watch the video. There will be a video lecture that corresponds to each module as well, right? And then you have 2 things that you have to do. The first thing that you have to do is you have to attempt those chapter exercises and upload them to Canvas. There will be an assignment for each module that is already set up to allow you to upload a scan of your exercises. You don't need to actually scan them. If you have a smartphone with a high resolution camera, you can just take a picture, but please make sure it's legible. Please double check everything that you submit, that it can be read at the resolution that you took the picture of. And you will also have a quiz that you have to do for each module. So again, typically there are 2 modules a week, right? So the first week, the second week, the third week, the fourth week, the 5th week, all 2 modules. The class gets more complicated, obviously, near the end. So near the end, for weeks where we're covering something that is particularly difficult, there will only be 1 module assigned. Again, so during some weeks you have learning practices. I apologize that you have to do these in addition to the work, but that's just how it goes. So as you can see on week 4, you have your first learning practice, and it's due by 11:59 p.m. Sunday, July 21st. For every week, all of the work is due at 11:59 p.m. the Sunday of that week. I guess weeks actually start on Sunday. Anyway, so you get to choose when you want to work on this, right? There won't be any lectures that are scheduled at specific times. You have the textbook and you have the videos, and it's up to you how exactly you want to spend your time working on this. But I do want to warn you not to get deceived by how easy the first 2 modules are. So, I bet that you could do this in 15 minutes, right? You could probably do this in 30 minutes. Right? By the time we get to just stuff like conjunctive normal form, you're probably going to have to spend at least 2 hours on it, right? So I would make sure to budget sufficient time to get through the modules. It would be a very, very bad idea for you to put off even trying these, especially when we've moved on in the course for a few weeks, till Sunday night. I do not think you'll be very successful if you try to do all of this at the last minute on Sunday. Also, it's very important that you give yourself sufficient time to account for technical difficulties, right? If something isn't uploading, you want to have enough time to email it to me. You do not want to be doing the quizzes, trying to upload your assignments very late on Sunday. And that's about all there is with respect to the syllabus. One thing that isn't on here that is important going forward is there is a discussion forum on Canvas, right? And I believe it's called Logic Help Forum. And so one option for getting help on exercises, or if you're confused about a concept or something, is you can post ideally a picture of your attempt to complete some problem, or an explanation of why you're confused on there. And I will be checking that regularly, and the TAs will be checking that regularly as well. So that's how the course works. If you have any questions about the syllabus, feel free to email me. Hopefully all the numbers add up and there aren't any typos. But yeah, and the first 2 modules are fairly easy. I don't think it's going to take you that much time. But again, just to remind you, the class starts out pretty easy and gets harder. Okay, so now that we've had a chance to look over the syllabus, what we're going to do next is I'm going to introduce the subject of logic very briefly, and then go through material in the first chapter of the textbook. Okay, so this is the textbook, by the way. Hopefully it's up on Canvas. I want to apologize just real quick for the clacking that you will hear when I write stuff with my Apple Pencil on my iPad. I had a plan to use an external microphone, but updated my iPad's iOS yesterday, and it broke my audio interface. So I'm going to get that fixed. Can't do it tonight, though. It'll be better next week, so again, apologies for that. As you can see, this is the textbook, the foreword. Not going to cover that. It's just why we're using this and not another book. So what is logic? That's probably a good place to start. So canonically, anyway, logic is the study of principles of inference and reasoning, right? There are generally 2 ways that you can go about studying principles of inference and reasoning. There is formal logic, which is what we will be learning, and then there is informal logic. So in formal logic, we are going to employ symbols and rules and formal laws, right, to analyze sentences and the relationships between sentences. You might think about this as kind of math without numbers, right? So instead of, math is 1 + 1 = 2, right? Those are numbers. So there are a lot of numbers in math, but in logic, we will be concerned with truth values. Whoa. Where'd I go? Okay, sorry, I bumped the side of the screen. Need to edit this out. Okay, so math, truth values. So instead of numbers, we will be doing formal operations with the values of true and false. Don't worry too much about what this looks like. Everything will be explained in very short bites, right? But you should expect to deal with sort of formal symbolism, right? We're going to be using weird symbols. We're going to have rules for manipulating those symbols in different forms, and then we're going to test statements in our formal language for certain properties. So formal logic is contrasted with informal logic. Informal logic doesn't use symbols, doesn't use precise rules. It explores fallacies in our everyday speech and reasoning. So if you took this class thinking that it was going to help you, I don't know, develop your critical thinking skills or develop your ability to construct arguments in kind of everyday language, you might want to reconsider. There is a different class in the philosophy department that covers that. Phil 8, Reason, Logic, and Idols of Thought is basically our informal logic class. So if that sounds like something that you're more interested in, I would suggest that you take that. And the reason why is that for most people, probably 99% of people, a course in informal logic is more useful, right? So in everyday life, being able to recognize fallacies, being able to evaluate whether an argument has kind of support in the informal sense is good enough for 99% of the reasoning you'll ever have to do. But if you are a philosophy major, if you are in a branch of mathematics, or if you are interested in computer science, probably more theoretical computer science, right, then this is stuff that you'll have to learn, right? Everything that we're going to teach here is kind of fundamental for all three of these disciplines. Also, if you are in pre-law or you would like to be a lawyer, the law itself, right, both laws and court decisions are written with this formal structure in mind. So to really understand what's going on, you'll have to be able to understand the structure at a formal level. One final thing is that if you are taking this course because you wanted an easy class to fulfill the mathematical and formal reasoning requirement, you may want to reconsider. Now, I didn't make this course any harder than it has to be. I'm not out to punish you. It won't be exceedingly difficult. But I am not sure that this is the easiest class that you could take to fulfill that requirement. My sense is that if the school offers pre-calculus or introductory statistics, those might be a little easier. If you're terrified of kind of the formal symbolism of math, you should be aware that you will have to understand technical definitions, employ new symbols, and follow precisely formulated rules for manipulating those symbols. If that absolutely terrifies you, you should find another course. But again, I've taught this before, and the way that I teach it, if you can sort of follow very simple, precise rules a step at a time, you will be fine. Up until the very last chapter, there are perfectly precise instructions for how to do everything. I can always tell you what you should do next. I'm going to let you use those instructions on all exams, so don't panic. But if the idea of formal symbolism just terrifies you, then you should maybe consider taking Phil 8. Okay, so I just wanted to cover this introductory thing. Let's go and look at some of the Chapter 1 material. So, logic, or at least the logic that we are going to learn in this course, is concerned with statements, right? And what a statement is a statement is a sentence, or part of a sentence, that can be true or false. Right? So some sentences are susceptible to being true or false, and some aren't. Typically speaking, in order to be true or false, a sentence has to assert something. It has to make some claim about how things are, right? So things like 1 plus 1 is equal to 2 are statements. Any mathematical formula that has an equal symbol is a statement, right? That asserts something. What it asserts is that 1 plus 1 is equal to 2, and it asserts something true. Not just true sentences or statements, though. Remember, a statement is a sentence or part of a sentence that can be true or false. So 1 plus 1 is equal to 3 is also a statement, whereas 1 plus 1 is equal to 2 asserts something true. 1 plus 1 is equal to 3 asserts something false, right? So other things that are statements are sentences like, the moon is made of cheese. Even though the moon is not made of cheese, right? That's a sentence that says something about how the moon is that can be true or false, and it happens to be false, right? So that's another statement. Just to give you a bunch of examples, is Quine ate 3 apple pies. Now, I don't know whether or not Quine ever ate 3 apple pies. Quine, by the way, is the guy who wrote the textbook that my textbook is based on, so I'm going to have a bunch of examples where I make fun of him, right? I don't know whether or not Quine ate 3 apple pies before he died, but he either did or he didn't, right? It has to be either true or false, right? So any sentence or any independent part of a sentence that asserts something is a statement, right? So we can have more complex statements, right? We can have statements like, Quine ate a cookie and he was happy. Right, so this is what we would call a compound statement. And it is a compound statement because it is composed of 2 independent parts. The first part is Quine ate a cookie. The second part is he was happy, right? So both of those component statements can be true or false on their own, right? This is a compound statement because it's made up of 2 component statements, right? It's either true or false that Quine ate a cookie. Again, I don't know whether or not he ever did. It's also true or false that he was happy. I don't know whether or not he ever was, but I do know that it has to be the case that it was true, that both of these component statements have to be true or false. We connect these 2 components with the word and in the next chapter we will look at and other words like it that are logical operators, just to give you a taste of what's coming. By the way, I apologize for my awful handwriting. I hope it's not too bad, right? So some sorts of sentences are not statements. So the largest and most obvious class of sentences that are not statements are things like questions. So if I were to ask, am I a pineapple? That can't be true or false because it doesn't actually assert anything. If I had said instead, I am a pineapple, that would be a statement. It would be a statement that is false, right? Another category of sentences that are not statements are commands. So if I tell you to bring me a pineapple, I have not said something that can, strictly speaking, be true or false. It can be true or false that you brought me a pineapple, but the command, bring me a pineapple, doesn't assert anything that could be a fact, right? That's one way in which commands differ from statements. There are other classes of sentences that can't be statements, so like interjections, right? So if you just scream the word fuck, right? That's okay. There's one last main category of things that you will commonly encounter that are not statements, and that category is nonsense. So a sentence that is nonsense might not have a question mark. It might not be a command. It might not be an interjection. But if the words that we're using don't have any meaning, they can't assert something about how the world is. So in the first chapter of the textbook, I quote the whole poem, but Lewis Carroll, who you probably know, how do you spell his name right? It's probably wrong. Right, Lewis Carroll was a logician. But he's probably more well known to all of you as the author of Alice in Wonderland. And somewhat strangely for a logician, Lewis Carroll's poems and much of his work in general is composed entirely of nonsense. So the first two lines of the poem, Jabberwocky, are not a statement, even though they might look like one at first. So Carroll writes, "'Twas brillig, and the slithy toves did gyre and gimble in the wabe." Right, so superficially anyway, that looks like it might be a statement, right? This "'twas brillig," so it was brillig, that could be a statement if we knew what brillig meant. The second part, and the slithy toves did gyre and gimble in the wabe, right? If we knew what slithy toves were, what it meant to gimble in a wabe, then that might be a statement. But because the words in this sentence lack meaning, they don't assert anything and cannot, strictly speaking, be true or false. So nothing, if I were to say plorps, dorp, snortfully. Right, that's not a statement because these are words I just made up. Right, plorps doesn't refer to anything, dorp doesn't mean anything, snortfully doesn't say anything. Right, so again, these are sort of the common categories of things that aren't statements: questions, commands, interjections, and nonsense. Right? And that is about all you really need to know about statements. You should be able to identify a statement when you see it. That's really the only thing you have to learn how to do in this chapter, right? And just remember, a statement is the sort of thing that can be true or false. That means it has to assert something about the way things are, right? It can't do that if it's a question, a command, an interjection, or nonsense, right? And that's really all you need to know about the first chapter. Please try the exercises and try the Canvas quiz. I don't think you'll find it very difficult. And move on to the next video when you are ready.